Live look now at the U.S. District Court in West Palm Beach. That's where federal magistrate judge Bruce Reinhart heard arguments on whether the affidavit leading to last week's Mar-a-Lago raid should be unsealed and made public. But do we, the public, have a right to know, or could this move be a national security risk? Arguments suggest the documents released could clarify if the search and seizure was justified, even if large amounts are redacted. NewsNation senior national correspondent Brian Enton is live in West Palm Beach. So, Brian, the judge saying he wants to see a redacted version by next week.
Yeah, Nichole, we are not going to see a redacted version of the affidavit today, but it does seem that we are one step closer. And this was definitely not a win for the Department of Justice today. They fought hard not to have to put together a redacted version, but it appears that's not likely going to happen. Inside the federal courthouse in Palm Beach County, Florida, Magistrate Judge Bruce Reinhart did not unseal the Mar-a-Lago affidavit, which includes the reason for the search at former President Trump's resort last week. But he did say he believes there are portions of the affidavit that could be made public. He's giving the Department of Justice 1 week to submit a redacted version to him, and then he'll decide whether to release it. Attorneys representing the media left satisfied.
I feel good about today's hearing. Judge Reinhart seemed to have a very good sense that it is his job as the gatekeeper in this case to perform his function of balancing the interest in the public of accessing these materials against the interest in the government in keeping them secret.
In court, prosecutors with the Department of Justice said this is an unprecedented situation and that unsealing the affidavit would compromise an ongoing criminal investigation in its early stages. They said the affidavit would provide a roadmap to the investigation and provide witness names. Prosecutors say this is a volatile situation, and they're worried for witnesses and potential witnesses' safety, and that releasing the affidavit could chill potential witnesses and keep them from cooperating.
I think Judge Reinhart is going to protect the identity of confidential informants, and that's probably the right outcome here. We don't want, none of the media interveners want to jeopardize the safety or security of a confidential informant.
And former President Trump has said over and over again that he wants an unredacted version of the affidavit to be released. So what happens next is the DOJ has 1 week. They've got until noon next Thursday to put together this redacted version. Then the judge will look it over, and he will ultimately decide whether or not to make it public. But the DOJ could also appeal to a higher court, which would drag this entire process out. And Nichole, if a redacted version finally comes out, you've seen redacted government documents before. It's possible we could just end up with one big black blob.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking. All right, Brian, thank you for that. Well, as these questions continue swirling over the legality of searching a former president's home, many also wondering about the potential consequences if the DOJ finds former President Trump did, in fact, commit a crime. There are calls, of course, for more transparency, and that includes releasing more documents. So joining the conversation now, former federal prosecutor David Weinstein. David, thanks for being with us again. Now, we know, of course, the Justice Department wanted to keep everything sealed. So is this a potential loss for the DOJ?
It's not a win, Nichole. I agree with Brian. It's not a win. A win would have been, you don't have to reveal anything. I'm not asking you to send me a redacted document. I'm going to maintain this under seal. So it's not a win. As to say whether it was a complete loss, it's not a complete loss either. It's going to take some effort and some work on their part to provide a redacted copy of this document to the judge, setting forth the reasons for redacting certain portions of it and allowing him to make the ultimate decision on what gets released.
All right, so David, as Brian just said, we could end up ultimately seeing just one big blacked out block. But if not, what could we learn if the judge does, in fact, decide to release this redacted version?
I don't think we're going to look and learn very much more. I think that what we'll see is parts of this affidavit that are boilerplate, that there's an agent with the FBI who's investigating certain crimes that we all know are being investigated, that this has been going on since a certain time period, that they've collected documents and that they've talked to witnesses. But we're not going to find out who the witnesses are, who they spoke with. We're not going to find out what other documents were seized pursuant to either grand jury subpoenas or other court orders, if any other court orders exist. And we're certainly not going to find out the identity of these witnesses, where they're located, how long they've been cooperating. So we may get as you were talking about, a whole bunch of black pages with very little for us to even look and read.
Well, I think this next question, this is something so many people want to know, because if this is in fact all about transparency, then why the redactions in the first place?
Well, it's about transparency so that we all don't have to keep guessing about what the nature of the probable cause was. But let's remember, and we say it a lot, you're presumed innocent until you're proven guilty. No one has been formally charged. This is an investigation. They don't want to release facts which may tend to say that someone did commit a crime when they didn't. They also don't want to release facts that relate to what they've said is a roadmap as to what their investigation is, and that might tip off people who are unaware, who possess documents, or who have certain information from either destroying those documents, from fleeing, or from no longer cooperating, or potentially from changing their testimony. So there's a lot to be considered here, and transparency is one thing. Was there sufficient probable cause? And that's what down the road, if someone is charged, they'll be given an opportunity to contest in a court of law. But for right now, I think the transparency we all want is simply some facts that we can all agree on existed so that we don't have to keep guessing about what happened here.
Oh, you always help us to better understand. Former federal prosecutor David Weinstein, thank you.
You're welcome.
Now we're going to bring in Bob Cusack, editor-in-chief with our partners at The Hill. So, Bob, could the contents of this affidavit hurt or help the former president politically?
Oh, I think they very well could hurt the former president, and we're going to learn more. How much more remains to be seen, how many redactions there are in there. But, you know, the public does have a right to know. The Department of Justice did say that, and that's what Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, said. And I think that was a good move, because otherwise we wouldn't know anything, and then the Trump allies just continue to hammer the government. Now we know more, but we don't know everything. So I think this, I mean, polls show January 6th and the investigations ongoing on a number of things have hurt the president, and he's clearly thinking about running. So yes, it could very well hurt the president even more.
Well, people on mailing lists, distribution lists will certainly attest to this. But since the raid, you know, the former president and his family have sent a number of fundraising emails hoping to capitalize on the situation. Is that a smart strategy, Bob?
Well, you know, fundraisers, Nichole, they're always thinking, how can I use this issue to raise money? And that's how Washington, D.C. money works, and trying to get the money into their accounts or PACs. So, you know, I think it's kind of a normal thing. And in this, when it's such a big story, I'm sure they're raking in big cash. And remember, Trump is, I think, very, very likely to run for president, and he's got to have some money. So yeah, he's doing what he's doing.
So it can be boosting those bank accounts. Bob, before we let you go, you know, what do you make of the former president jokingly endorsing 2 Democrats in New York?
Well, yeah, these 2 Democrats, including Carolyn Maloney, who's the chair of the Oversight Committee, that certainly was always critical of the former president. So he you know, he's a showman, he's an entertainer, and he did this sarcastic endorsement, which of course, you know, set Twitter afire. And now the opponents of these 2 people who were so-called endorsed are using that as well. But yeah, these were not endorsements. Just to be clear, these were actually meant to hurt 2 people who have gone after Trump.
All right, editor-in-chief of The Hill, Bob Cusack, thank you so much. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.